Hi everyone, this is Martha. I am a relationship counselor and clinical sexologist. And in the last few days, a few things happened that made me decide to make this video about some of the difficulties that people commonly have when they are in a long-term relationship. And by no means am I passing any judgment on anybody. I personally have gone through some of these behaviors when I was younger, and from observing the difficulties that people are having in their relationships, and from remembering the difficulties that I had in my relationships in the past when I was younger, I thought I'll share with you some of the common behaviors that people engage in, and hopefully it illuminates some of the behaviors that perhaps you are engaged in, and from there hopefully you decide to make changes to allow your relationship to be more loving. Okay, one of the things that I want to share about work and life is that we are taught from young age to have everything make sense. I think this comes from science, from logic, from being taught from our education system that we need to use our brain. And it's like, everything needs to make sense. And I'm not sure if you have had your partners or yourself say things like, it doesn't make sense. It's really quite ridiculous if you think about it, because what you're trying to do when you say it doesn't make sense is you are putting it onto the other person now that you are being irrational, or you are nonsense, and it could be phrased in a different way, but even the statement, it needs to make sense. I understand it just comes out. However, think about it. For something to make sense, you're actually using your brain to analyze it. So just because you have a different perspective from the other person, it doesn't mean that their truth is not as important or relevant. And actually, you're trying to understand the person. However, when you make a statement like doesn't make sense, there is an element of judgment there. So when we say it doesn't make sense, what you're actually trying to say is it doesn't make sense to me from my lenses. And when we say something like it needs to make sense, we are actually looking at something as black and white. And being human beings, we sometimes don't do things that make sense. We know what is the right thing to do, how to manage our time, how to get to point A to point B, but we don't do that. We get distracted. We check our phone. We end up doing something else that catches our eye because it's this interesting video on YouTube, and before we know it, we'll go down the rabbit hole, and we are not doing things that make sense. So by saying things that it doesn't make sense, sometimes what you're actually really saying is the way you look at life is black and white, that there's no shades of gray in between. And there are people who can't let go of the past, cannot let go of things that have happened because it doesn't make sense. So for them, they need to make sense of something before they can let it go. And when they tell their partner what you said doesn't make sense, they're trying to dissect the way their partner thinks to a way that they can understand so that it makes sense to them. But actually, we human beings are irrational. So not everything makes sense. Just like, why is it that some people sleep on their right side or left side of the bed? Why do some people sleep on their back? Does it make sense? Not everything needs to make sense. So if we are trying to make sense of everything and understand our partner's behavior from this part, then we are actually really driving ourselves crazy. And when we say things like it doesn't make sense, it actually does come across as very dismissive of what your partner just shared. It's like, oh, it doesn't make sense what you just said. Like, how about if we change that phrase into something like, help me understand where you're coming from. I would love to get to know you better. Do you have any idea why you prefer this side of the bed? You see, when we start to talk in these kinds of ways, it's just much more approachable. And when somebody says, I don't know, honestly, a lot of times when someone says, I don't know, they really mean I don't know. And you can take the question as it is, I don't know, or is there any room for further discussion, rather than the statement of it doesn't make sense. So I would really like to invite the need to make sense of things. That's number one. And number two is, this need to make sense is very much linked to the second point I want to make, which is the micromanaging of your partners. Because it needs to make sense, there needs to be a logical path. And they like to form associations with, this is what you did last time, so the next time, why you're not doing this? Or the next time is like, see, you're doing this is the second time, this is the third time, there's a pattern. And why are we needing to look at all these and form patterns? In a way, we are trying to create safety for ourselves. We like to know our partners. So instead of feeling that that person is overbearing and overwhelming, the romantic side of your partner may be thinking like, I just want to feel really, really close to my partner and really understand them. However, sometimes they don't realize that actually, depending on perspective, you can romanticize it and say, I really want to understand my partner, or actually it's turning around into micromanaging and actually really come across as suffocating. You're not letting the person have room to be. You're not letting this person have room to evolve. People do change. So when we keep saying, you're always like that, you always, these kinds of things, it really starts to make them become hyper vigilant, aware of their behaviors, and actually begin to be very afraid of how they act around you, because you are going to start saying things like, how come like that? It doesn't make sense. You always like this. How come last time like this? We are trying to make sense. And in another indirect way, if you look at it, it's a kind of micromanaging, isn't it? Micromanaging as in, you really want your partner to do the things that you feel make sense, but also the way that you like things to be done. And really, it's not respecting your partner's individuality. We are individuals. The way you like something, the way you need something to be, often is a preference. And certain things may change when you highlight this to your partner, and certain things may not change. And part of learning how to be with somebody in the long term is learning how to focus on, what is it you want to focus on? Do you want to focus on the things, the 10% of things that irritate you about your partner, or the 90% of the things that brings you joy about your partner? The third thing I want to say, so coming back to this micromanaging, is this need for safety and control, to have security. People who are insecure within themselves, or within the relationship, they may feel like they need to know everything, the micro details, the micro thoughts of their partner, because they themselves inherently are insecure. They can call their behavior romantic, but actually it borders on being obsessive. The third one that I want to share is confusing passion with defensiveness, the need to be right, and interrupting. I have had certainly a number of clients who they come into session, and they interrupt their partner in front of me, as if their partner cannot speak up for themselves. It's almost like they become the parent of their partner. They are, from their nonverbal behavior, they are embarrassed of their partner. They're not giving their partner the room to be themselves. And that boils down to micromanaging that I just mentioned. And when we start to feel that they're taking too long in the session, they have just as much right to speak. When I see a sign of clients being constantly interrupted by their partners, it is a telltale sign of the health of the relationship. And not only do clients interrupt their partners in front of me, they often interrupt me. And it's not even just the interruption that is the concern, because they are not trained communicators or counselors, right? So you can't really uh, hold that against them per se. But when they are defensive in the sense that every single thing that I say to them, sometimes I'm only repeating back what they said to me, as in I'm paraphrasing. But they jump on me and they correct me and they need me to be 100% accurate. They don't let anything slide. They don't allow for any generalizations. They are doing nitpicking. Then this person is being very self-righteous. I need to be right. Everything around me needs to be micromanaged, including my counselor. That is a sign that they are very, very defensive. So this need to be right, self-righteousness, this need to defend themselves all the time is also another sign of how difficult it is to be a partner with them. And they don't even realize the way they do anything, the way they speak out in session tells me a lot about who they are and the health of their relationship. And so it's very interesting that this confusing, all these interrupting, this need for things to be right and in order, the nitpicking and the defensiveness as somebody who is passionate about life. Um, in life, we have many passions, we have many interests. We are passionate about work, we are passionate about living, and we are passionate about our love, we are passionate about our relationship. Um, does passion mean being defensive, self-righteous, and interrupting? Um, and passion cannot be one way. It cannot be that you are always right, you are always interrupting, and you are always defensive, and then there's no room at all for your partner at all to do any of those passionate behaviors because you are the passionate one and your partner is not. Can you see this is actually very self-suffocating, micromanaging behavior that people don't even realize that they are engaged in. So I am sharing these three difficult behaviors that I have noticed in people, myself included in the past, is that we are all evolving. And as we become more aware of ourselves, and this is illuminated to us, perhaps we can make decisions on how we want our relationships to be. If I were to put it in a different way to you, do you want to have a partner who's scared of you, who's scared of speaking up, who's scared of saying the wrong thing, who's scared of you forming conclusions and deciding that what is their next move because you are doing because you know them better than they know themselves? Then what's going to happen is you're going to end up with a partner who is being controlled, stifled, and this is definitely not a healthy relationship. So with that, I just want to end and conclude this video. There are three kinds of common behaviors that people engage in. The first one they say is it doesn't make sense, and they need to make sense of everything, that everything needs to be logical. Two, they don't realize this, but they're actually trying to draw patterns and micromanage their partner's behavior because they themselves are insecure and they need security. Three, they actually behave in a way that is overbearing and they associate their behaviors as I'm a passionate person. And passion can come across in many different ways. And the way you think you are as a passionate person, have you ever asked for feedback from your partner to see if their idea of you being a passionate person is passion or is it bordering on scary? You may think that you're okay, but your partner is actually shutting down. And when you start to notice this behavior and maybe your partner is not forthcoming to you, there is a reason why. Because it hasn't paid off in the past, to be honest with you, because you're always interrupting, you are always self-righteous, you're always right. And then when they do speak up, they can't win anyway because you're always right. And then then you're defensive, and you're not receptive to anything. So when I see this going on with people, I do start to question, like, are these the behaviors of a narcissistic person? I'm always right, you're always wrong. It's always my way or the highway. And there are two kinds of narcissistic. There's the outright narcissistic, and there's the covert narcissistic. Covert narcissistic is more discreet than the narcissistic. So I'm not a psychologist. I'm also still learning about the workings of the human mind. So there are lots of videos on YouTube, articles on narcissistic people. I've just highlighted some of the common difficult behaviors that I've witnessed. And I hope this video gives you some illumination, and maybe you are the person that is behaving in these ways and would like some self-reflection. And there is a time when we're young and we engage in childish behaviors, and then there comes a time when we fall in love and we realize that we are hurting our partners with our childish ways. And there's a time and place for everything, including a time to grow up. And it is difficult to realize that what you think is right is actually not good at all, and actually hurting people. It is very hard to hear. But I think the sign of a mature adult is to realize we can always learn, and we can always do better, and we can always evolve. So let every day be a day of learning more and more about yourself. When you increase your self-awareness, when you know yourself, and then I think your awareness of other people also starts to develop. The world doesn't revolve around you. And if you want to be in a healthy, happy relationship, you do need to take into consideration the way you are behaving and communicating, and how this is affecting your partner. Don't say things like, this is the way I am. What, you expect me to change? So look up some of these videos about healthy relationships, and you'll realize that being in a relationship is when your partner is your mirror of how you're behaving and what is not working. So it takes humility to be in a relationship. And it is definitely challenging, because if you think you're always right, then it's very hard to admit that perhaps there are some things that you are doing that is very hurtful and needs changing. So with that, this is Martha of Eros Coaching. That's eroscoaching.com. Please subscribe to my mailing list, and I would really like you to check out my resources and this video below. And know that I now have a Patreon website, so you can subscribe to that, support me financially a little bit. And that's where I'm also taking sex questions and relationship questions. So yes, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you like it, and please post your comment below. Thanks for watching this. Bye.